An excerpt from the short story The Rooted by LMG Wilson. Lonnmore. The letters had been carved ages past, and the wood had cracked from the damp in time. Moss snaked through the grooves of the crossroads knotted sign, which pointed down the darker fork in the road. Although Nell Hawthorn had passed the sign a dozen times before, not once had she considered the path. But a cough crept out from the back of the covered wagon, a ragged sound deep and wet. She put aside the reins too big for her hands and pulled back the light fabric enclosing the wagon's interior. Her father looked frail and disheveled, so unlike himself. His waistcoat was unbuttoned, kerchief abandoned, and he breathed raggedly beneath his wool greatcoat. Nell needn't press her chill hand to his head to know the fever still gripped him. She swallowed, thinking of how little it took to fell her father. He was no small man, strong as an ox, quick-witted and stubborn. But a stuck wheel in the mud, a stumble in the mire, and a gash in his thigh had been enough. It took him half a day to admit the wound bothered him. By the next morning, Nell could see the fever plainly on his face. His words when he finally accepted he could not steer the cart still shook her, even a day later. Ride straight to Wakefield, stop for none, and keep your cab low. Whatever happens, veer not from the path. A choice now lay ahead of her. There was the road well-traveled, the trail to Wakefield. Though barely 14, she'd taken the road many times before and knew it to be at least a day's ride in good weather, a day and a half in the brewing storm. And if the tingle in the air could be trusted, it would be minutes before rainfall. The wagon would be soaked through, or worse, the storm could wash out the road. In his state, her father wouldn't fare well in the damp weather. He needed rest, a warm bed, and a fire. He will not make it to Wakefield, she feared. So, Nell turned the cart towards Lonnmore. Boughs reached over to cover the path like sickly fingers. Though not all the trees had shaken clean summer's growth, the trunks passed by as columns of pitch, and shadows danced there, on the distant dimming horizon and just beyond the cart's lantern light. They drew her eyes from the road, only to disappear again with another muted thud of horseshoes on dirt. The cart strained with groans as it passed over emerging rocks, and Nell guessed no one had taken the road to Lonnmore in at least a fortnight. No one would once the snow came. She shivered and pulled her oversized greatcoat closer, but despite it being thick, she wished she'd donned more layers under the black fabric. There was small comfort that her father let her dress as a boy while they traveled, for practicality, he had told her. Though now she suspected caution played a part too. After all, what safety could there be for a young girl in petticoats alone on the road? The tense storm air thickened with each tree they passed, and in the familiar drone of trail sounds, she was left no real company, nothing more than the whispers in her heart. He will die this night. Then you will be alone. The light dimmed, swallowed by darkening clouds that lowered into the forest canopy. The storm's first crack rang out. Nell let out a curse unbefitting a young woman, and the horse whinnied with her. "Hush now, Charleston," she said to the mouthy workhorse. "And hurry." On Nell's urging with the reins, Charleston surged forth under the gnarled branches, some low enough to scrape the top of the wagon. They clawed at the fabric barrier protecting her father from the chill and cackled in collisions with one another in the wind. But then it came, the rain. There was no warning of a drizzle before heaps of it drowned out the forest around her. The shiver returned and slipped in under her clothes as the rain soaked through. On she urged, hoping the storm would continue north and not west with her to the village of Lonnmore. I hope you enjoyed this opening to the short story The Rooted. The full story will be included in the horror anthology Behind the Shadows by Inked Publishing. If you like this short story and want to hear more, make sure you like, subscribe, and yes, hit that bell to stay notified. I finally said it. There we go. As always, thank you so much to my patrons and everyone who follows and comments and leaves encouraging notes or critiques if need be, and anything else. I really appreciate the engagement.